Everyone, so Dr. Kuniak with a video lecture. I'm sorry, the light behind me is a little bit excessive, but that's where we're at. So I wanted to show you a couple of things this week, one of which is the narrative assessment outline that I created for all of you, and then the other is I'm going to kind of generally show you a genogram. I know we said we would do that live in class, but because we have this break with spring break, our midterm, and all of that, that has kind of for lack of better words, interrupted the sequence. I don't want to lose time. So I'm going to show you this here and then we can live do it, but this will at least give you kind of an idea of what a genogram looks like and all that. So let's first take a look at, I'm going to share screen and find my narrative assessment outline that I created for all of you. Um, so this is the narrative assessment outline. It's very rough. I was getting questions about how to represent the information from your biopsychosocial assessment. You can use and you default should use the biopsychosocial that I have as a template, or psychosocial, I think I titled it, in the course, in the resources section. Use that to, you can use another one if you find one, but default use that one. But then folks were asking me like how to present the information, so like that was the example biopsychosocial that was mentioned in the syllabus, but then there was no real clear method or example of how to present that information. And so I very quickly worked up this document, because there is an example in your text, but just to give you another format to work with, and one that I'm very familiar with, it's very common to do the biopsychosocial and get all of this sort of demographic startup information about your client. And then the next document that you write, other than a treatment plan, is a narrative assessment, which is meant to be a short form assessment, like written assessment of your client. It's very common to have, all of their presenting information at the top. You don't have to do that for me. Their diagnosis, the start date of treatment, their client number, which is just a number that you assign to your clients. Back when I started doing this, we used to put social security numbers. They don't do that anymore because that's a huge compliance issue. But date of birth, all that. Then there's an introduction, which is just kind of a brief narrative description of who the client is. So you would say, like, if I use me as an example, client Stephen Kuniak, and then in parentheses Steve, because that's what I tend to go by. Cis male, my age, lives in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, which is near greater Pittsburgh area of Pennsylvania, in a small, Greensburg is a small city, and blah, 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 blah. Identifies as white, non-Hispanic, to speak to the cultural components, but comes from an ethnically broad European background from his father's side, a purely Italian background from his mother's side. You don't have to get that detailed, but I'm just trying to give information. Uses he, him, his pronouns. That's kind of newer. They didn't do that as often in the narratives when I was starting off, but I think it's a good thing to add. And so you can use most of that. Don't go into great detail, but just give me a brief narrative of who the client is. First name is fine. Don't give me last names and all that. This should not be much more than a long paragraph or two. For our purposes for this assignment, I would just keep it as a paragraph. Presenting problems. So what are they bringing to the session? I apologize. I'm in charge of my son, so you hear him talking about something with his tablet in the background. So presenting problems. What is the client bringing in? So identifies with anxiety symptoms. I don't know, OCD characteristics, depression symptoms, whatever. So we talk frequency, intensity, duration is the stuff that you want to identify with your presenting problems. So I put when did it start, and then I just wrote out frequency, intensity, duration. So how often is it occurring? Like, is it every day, every other day, every hour? Are they having panic attacks? once a week? Are they having panic attacks several times a day? How bad are they? So you can use that as a scale from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. You can also just say mild, moderate, severe. It's up to you. Um, and then how long has it been going on, which is kind of like from the is kind of linked to when did it start? Is this only been going on for um, you know, 6 months to a year? Has this been going on since they were 5 years old? Whatever the case may be. So just again, a short paragraph explaining what they're bringing, when it's happening, how often it's happening. Strengths are usually mentioned. We try to be very strengths focused in our field, so having the strengths listed is important. What strengths, coping mechanisms, skills do they bring? This is where you get an opportunity to reframe certain things. This is where you can say if they've been a victim of like sexual assault, you can identify them as a survivor. That is a strength. If they if they have been coping with this for most of their life, that's a strength that they've been managing with minimal additional supports. Have they, been in and out of counseling? They're familiar with other services. They are engaged in their community. They love reading. They love spending time with their family. There's any number of things that you can put as strengths. And if you didn't gather a lot, because that is a part of the biopsychosocial to some degree, but if you didn't gather a lot, that's okay. It doesn't have to be a huge section by any means. And then a brief mental health history. What generally have they shared? If they have no previous mental health history, that's what you write. If they have, kind of a profound mental health history, you don't have to go into great detail for my purposes, but I want to give you the experience of kind of how you represent that information to me. Does not have to be involved. Just then I put a note in a full narrative. You would have those sections, but you would also, and that is my cat. One of my cats. All of these, my wife's cats. Let me be clear. It's knocking things over in the background. You would have these other sections as well. You do not need to do any of those for this at all. I just wanted you to have the information so that if you're ever tasked with coming up with a narrative format or whatever the case may be, these are very common things to add, and you write them out in narrative form as opposed to just putting bullet points or just responding to questions like in the biopsychosocial. It's creating a story so that if someone wanted to pick this up, a story of what's going on in the client's life. These are the typical things you report for mental status components. These should not be long narratives. These should just be a sentence or 2 or 3 for each of these sections. It's just appearance. Client presents with, dressed appropriately for time, space, and season. Client is not dressed for time, space, and season. Appear dressed in, I guess in Western Pennsylvania, shorts and a hoodie is appropriate in winter. That's common enough, but you just give a few sentences to identify what it is that you're observing with the client. So that's all that. If you have specific questions, let me know. I am not looking for great detail. I'm just trying to provide a model so that folks can have an example to work with. Just an opportunity to take what you saw, because I don't need you to submit the entire biopsychosocial filled out and the entire mental status exam filled out to me to review. Just give me some bullet points here and more so reflect on what the experience was like and what you feel like you might need additionally to these sort of assessments to really get a feel for a new client and what's going on in a new client's experiences. So that's that. Let me stop share on this. I also wanted to just quickly show you a genogram so we're not starting from scratch with everybody. I have historically done my genograms in PowerPoint, actually, and I will show you why. Share screen. I would also suggest using, when you're doing a genogram the first time, you're not doing this for me. This is not an assignment. This is just since we're talking about different forms of assessment, this is an assessment tool I really like to use, very common in family counseling. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to presume you can and move on. It's not showing me my green borders, but it looks like it's sharing. So hold on, let me try one more time. Stop share. Usually a green border appears around everything that I'm sharing. Okay, all right, it shows this time. So hopefully you saw this the first time, but even if not. This is my family. I'm exaggerating some stuff, but this is my family because it's the one I'm most familiar with, so I can draw these up easily. I will live draw this to show you my thought process when we have our next live meeting, but just to give you an idea, Represented here are squares are males, circles are females. Triangles are typically used for, so they may have changed this now, but triangles have been there. There is a science to genograms. There are books written on genograms. I'll show you one when we do our live meeting. Triangles were typically used for like non-binary, trans. If the person has transitioned, you would use what they have transitioned to, because a trans male is male in our from our perspective. So, but there are some unique symbols for new things that are being developed. You want to do at least, oh my god, my cats, my wife's cats. You want to do at least 3 generations to see patterns that arise with the genograms. And we'll talk about that. But I would typically start with your generation of focus. So I tended to start with so me, my wife, my sister, like this generation. You can go as detailed as you need to be, or as you want to be. Like my mom's side of the family is big. There's at one time there were just 13 of us cousins, but even since then there's more now. And so my mom has a brother and I think 3 additional sisters, and all of them have families and kids and stuff like that. So it can get messy. But circles again are females, squares are males. These generational lines connect, or I'm sorry, relationship lines connect people. So like my mom and dad are married. They had me out of that union. And then my wife and I are married, and our kids come off that union. When I taught this the last time, Ollie was only 6 weeks old. He's almost a year old now, so you get the idea. We try to make all of these lines the same color. So like this PowerPoint, I'd have to recolor these, but PowerPoint tries to make the lines that you draw in blue, and then these shapes are black. You would probably try to make all of that black all the way across the board, because what are really called relationship lines are things that you want to have colored so that they stand out. Lines like this that connect, say, my uncle David. So there's me, my dad's younger brother David is very close with my son Maxton. And so you want to, the reason you want to have multi generations here is because you can see patterns that have arisen. My grandfather has passed away. My grandmother is still living, though she has dementia, and there is a way to show that, but I just didn't. My dad has passed away. My wife's dad has passed away, both several years ago. So my son does not have, neither of my sons has any grandfather figure in his life. And if we extended my wife's family, her father has a brother, but he's friendly with us, but he's not super involved. And my mother-in-law has 2 brothers. One lives in the South, and one is involved, and he's around. I just didn't depict him. He shows up for events and things like that. But the person that is closest to my son is my uncle David. They have a very close relationship, and David probably sees Max and couple times a month. So he's sort of stepped in as this grandfather figure. And so it helps to see how that connects across generations, because if there was a counselor working with my family, maybe they would want to loop my uncle in for family counseling related stuff, or at least be aware that he exists and he's an important part of the family. You circle your so like if I'm the indicated patient, that's why I have the 2 squares. If it was my wife, it would be 2 circles, something to set them off as the person of interest. And then everyone who lives in the home with the indicated patient is circled. So sometimes if I gotta chill, if like other family members, like if my mom came to live with us or something like that, you would draw the circle to include that person. I don't need anyone else in my house. That's what that was from. These are twins, just as an aside, and that is legit. My sister has twin girls that are both the same age as Maxton. My grandfather and my uncle Danny had a very conflictual relationship. This would not, you wouldn't draw a lightning bolt, but PowerPoint used to have an option for like a squiggly line and doesn't anymore. So it's a jagged line that is a conflict line. There's more than this, and we'll talk about that. But there's, closeness is 2 lines, enmeshment, which is not a healthy connection, is 3. So I just want to give you an idea of what's, hold on, buddy. I just want, oh, my son wants yellow paper. Okay. So that gives you an idea of what's going on. I'm sorry for the interruptions. I just wanted to make sure I got the video done before, you know, before we get to the weekend. And he woke up a little earlier from his nap than I expected. So here we are. Hopefully that gives you an idea though about the narrative assessment and how that connects and gives you some highlights to work with. And hopefully it does a good job of introducing the idea of a genogram to you. And we will look at all of this a little more with a little more detail the next time we meet. But I just wanted to start you off. So hopefully that all is helpful, and I will look forward to talking with you again and again. I apologize for the extra players in the video. I don't typically have those, but take care. Have a good weekend.